again, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Daily December 2019, day 4. Now, this is a really great example of me already starting to fall behind by day 4 because I am currently recording this at 11:59 p.m. on the 4th. So, yeah. Today got a little bit away from me. I have a new D&D campaign that I'm trying to get started. And so I spent the last, I don't know, hour starting an email chain to get that going. So, and then the rest of the day was just anxiety is really fun. Anyway, so today, I meant to have a little bit more stuff about doing Daily December, but again, the day has gotten away from me. So, because someone mentioned they'd like to hear my Adventurers League horror stories, that's what I'm going to do. So it's story time, folks. I may not get through. Like I have a fair amount, and again, I was only a. Not only was I only a local coordinator for I think it was 6 months. I might be wrong. It might have been 5 or 4, but it was not a long time. I was actually a senior local coordinator just based on tenure, meaning most local coordinators didn't last 6 months. That's how bad it was. So I should probably start. I got the local coordinator position by basically I did the convention I mentioned last time. I did that, and it went off really, really well. Well enough that I was invited on staff as part of the volunteer staff for the next, I believe, 3 years. At one point, I was running all organized play for that convention. So that was Pathfinder, Adventures League, and Shadowrun missions. So that went really well. The regional coordinator, who I'm just going to call Fred. Fred is not his real name because as much as I have a pretty big problem with him, I just don't feel like outing him. But going forward, he's going to be Fred. So I get in contact with Fred, and I go, "Hey," I start trying to be a little coy about it, so I don't come on too strong. I'm like, "Hey, I don't know about the local coordinator is supposed to do this, but if you're looking for any more." And he's like, "Oh, that local coordinator's gone. He's not part of the group anymore." "Oh, well, if that means you have an opening," and he just goes, "If you want the position, it's yours." Which I was thrilled about, and I assumed it was because I did such a great job with this convention. It wasn't. He couldn't keep coordinators at all, so he was always getting more and more, and then firing them. So anyway, I get this job, and the first thing they make me do is he sends me, I believe it was a Google Doc, but it was a 9-page contract to be a local coordinator. Now, at this point, I'd been working in retail management for about, I think, 4 or 5 years. I had done, I had done staffing and hiring. I'd worked with HR before. I knew the contracts that everyone from your hourly employees all the way up to store management. I knew what the contracts looked like. A store managers, or actually, I didn't know store managers. I knew the ASM contract, the assisted store manager. Even an ASM who has keys to the entire building, codes, and authority to do literally whatever they want. Their contract was, I believe, maybe 2 or 3 pages. That was it. And that was in legalese. It was written by a lawyer specifically to cover the business's ass, and things like, don't do this, do this. These are your job requirements. That's not everything you will do. Blah 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 blah. If you've ever gotten a job, you've seen an employment contract, and a lot of times, most people's employment contract is just a page with a paragraph or two on it. Sometimes it might be a page and a half. For entry-level stuff. And as you get higher, they add more things. Like if there's salary involved instead of an hourly wage, salaries take longer to describe and all that. So I was familiar with employment contracts, which is basically what this was. I'd never seen an 11-page employment contract, much less for a volunteer position. So that was the first thing that went, this is rather bizarre. And I read through the whole thing because I don't sign anything without reading it. And it was just so much, like pages of it were just talking about the Adventurers League itself and how important the regional coordinators were. There was tons and tons of rules I'll get into later. And then it had punishments in there as well, which you don't put in employment contracts generally. You might have a line in there, which is very, very common, which basically says breaking a part of this contract does not nullify the entire contract. It's a very common thing you'll see in contracts in general. That's really the only thing. There's generally a separate document that you will sign in most businesses that talk about punishment and stuff like that. But that happens well after you're hired, generally on your first or second day of work, and it's not that long either. So it was bizarre to see, and it was obviously written by someone that didn't know what they were talking about and just wanted to feel important. Had a lot of condescension written into it, a lot of, I'm the law, you'll do what I say. That kind of feeling, from what I remember. Again, this is years ago, and my memory is bad on a good day. Excuse me for just 1 second. Oh, sorry, it's something in my eye. So anyway, I signed this contract knowing that legally this is not a sound contract. So anything in there, I'm never going to have to worry about, but it makes him feel good. And then I start finding out what it is I'm supposed to do. believe, I'm not 100% certain on this. I believe I was required to go to, let's see, I was required to go to any local conventions in my specific area, and because I lived in Wisconsin, that was actually a lot. Um, Wisconsin is the birthplace of D&D. I know, for me personally, between Madison and Milwaukee, I think there's a dozen different conventions throughout the year, just in Madison and Milwaukee. Um, that have D&D Adventures League stuff. I was required to attend them, or I had to come up, or I had to explain why I was unable to attend them. I was required to spend, and I can't remember the exact numbers. I want to say it was between 2 and 8 hours a week doing local coordinator things. I think it was closer to like the 2 or 3 hours weekly. So for the month, it turned into like between like 20 hours a month ish. I think. Again, it's been a long time doing local coordinator stuff, which included driving out to stores and pitching new stuff, answering their questions, helping them set out their own Adventure League stuff. What it didn't count is running Adventures League games at those stores did not count. Organizing D&D nights, as in actually being the person there that made sure there was enough DMs, that didn't count. Going to conventions that I was required to go to, or at least come up with an excuse why I couldn't, didn't count towards that. I can't remember. I think there was one other thing that I was required to do, but it didn't count towards my hours. Again, this is a volunteer, unpaid position. So that was like, that was strange. And I was working, at this point, I believe I was working full time. I was a full-time student, and I was running my YouTube channel at that point, a little more than I am now, which I put somewhere between 20 to 40 hours a week into. So I was basically working 3 jobs and then just picked up a part-time job. So that was weird. But I'm like, okay, that's fine. Every month, I was required to fill out a questionnaire. Oh, and one of the other things you could do for your hours was to basically lurk on the. Oh, no! It wasn't. This was another requirement. You were required to post on the D&D Adventures League page, Facebook page, the official D&D Facebook page, and anywhere else they really wanted you to go. But they had a huge emphasis on Facebook. You weren't allowed to, and that was part of your, you could count that as part of your time. You weren't allowed to count anything on Twitter, Reddit, other forums, anything like that. Had to be on Facebook. And even if you were getting your hours in physical stores, you had to post to the Facebook page. At least, I want to say it was at least a couple times a week. But again, I might be misremembering. It might have been daily, to be honest. I don't remember. So yeah, that was all the crazy stuff we had to do. Every month, we would have to fill out a Google survey where we would have to basically give receipts of all the time we spent. We had to say how much time we spent in stores. We had to say how much time we spent on the phone. We had to say how much time we spent on Facebook posting. If we missed any of those, we had to give a detailed explanation as to why we didn't do it that month. And then the second half would be it would ask our opinion for things like, what do you think of this thing that's happening? And the final thing was opinion about the regional coordinator himself, Fred, where he would ask, what do you think about what I'm doing? And that was annoying. I didn't want to fill out this form. It took about 10 to 15 minutes, which isn't a large amount of time. But again, this is a volunteer organization that's not paying me. And just because filling out the form didn't take much time, keeping track of everything I had to track did. And keeping track of things did not count towards my hours. So as you can see, it's already starting to get real fun. What started to happen was there was an Adventures League Facebook page, and then there was a local coordinators Facebook page where the LCs could all talk to each other, and invariably things would come up there and start, not really arguments, but discussions about, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And the regional coordinators would post there on a fairly regular basis to give us information all the LCs needed, but they didn't want the general public knowing about yet. Things like how the AL was going to utilize a new book coming out, or things like that. That we couldn't reveal yet. So we did get a little bit of insider information early, not a ton, or at least not there. I had friends that did playtesting that got a lot of insider information really quickly because they were playtesting official stuff. And so they would every so often give me little hints. They never gave me concrete stuff. They'd be like, oh, you mentioned you really like this. Maybe you should, keep an eye out for the next thing that gets published. Or every so often they go, oh man, I just played this new adventure. I can't tell you what it's about, but holy crap, was it amazing. You have to play this or run it as soon as it comes out because you will love it. So I got that kind of stuff, and it was fun. And when I first started the LC Facebook page, wasn't that bad. Like every so often you'd see little arguments come up, and then the retail coordinators would come in and they would shut things down. They were mods on the page, and they would lock the discussions. They would delete things, and they always used this thing that was actually in the contract, the 11-page contract. It was hashtag AL _RC, which meant they were speaking as an official regional coordinator for the Adventures League. Now, I should point out at this point, the D&D Adventures League had nothing to do with Wizards of the Coast. It was organized by a completely different group of people, and it was in no way actually affiliated with Wizards of the Coast for legal reasons that I'll get into later. Wizards of the Coast did have people that specifically spoke to the AL admins, but none of the admins actually worked for Wizards of the Coast, which gave them the ability to do things like have volunteer workers, because Fair Labor and Standards Act states that no for-profit company can have volunteers working for them, and Wizards of the Coast is a for-profit company. So it would be quite literally illegal for them to use volunteers. So that's why the separation was there. And that's where a lot of these regional coordinators went kind of nuts. Now, I'm not saying all RCs were bad. However, the majority of the ones I dealt with were, they all fit a very similar mold. They all worked in kind of dead-end jobs with no authority. One I believe was like an office manager, and another one worked for a retail chain and did planograms, things like that, where there's no clear path to promotion and no real authority. Office managers in general aren't really managers in the idea of, they hire and fire. Generally, they're more like supervisors that just make sure everything gets done. So all of these regional, or the ones that I had issues with, generally all were in positions where they had little to no authority. They were all older, like late 30s, 40s, and they all had this idea that they wanted to be important, which is a bad thing to have when you put people into leadership positions, because they would throw around that hashtag like it was going out of style. And it didn't matter what the argument was about. We had an argument once, I'm not kidding here, where this was on the AL page, not the LC page. So a player who's not he's not an LC or an RC or anything, asked, hey, I want to be a Tempest cleric. However, there aren't any gods in the Forgotten Realms that have been officially released by Wizards, which are the only stuff you were allowed to use in the AL, that aren't evil. Like all the Tempest domain all the gods that had Tempest as one of their domains were all evil in some way, and they didn't want to. And so one of the LCs goes, well, then you can't. You have to choose one of these deities, and if you don't like it, then that's just tough. And I said, well, let's actually look at the player's handbook. And I showed in the first page of the description of the cleric, it talked about, yes, clerics may choose a divine domain based on something that their specific deity actually has part of their domains that they control, or they may just choose a domain that reflects the aspect of the deity that they identify with most. And so I made an example, Selune, which is the goddess of the moon. I can't remember what her domains are, but Tempest was not one of them. So I mentioned, so like a Tempest cleric of Selune might focus on the aspects of the moon that control the tides. The moon controls the tides, and those tides can, help a ship get out of port and sail, or they can cause massive storms and things and sink ships. That aspect of Selune might be referenced by a Tempest cleric as, I'm the kind of mighty hand of Selune, or even in her class with Shar, who's the goddess of caves in the Underdark. Selene and Shar are twins. They hate each other. So a Tempest cleric of Selene might be a very active a proponent of hunting out the acolytes of Shar to wipe them out because that's what they're god. I kind of view a Tempest cleric kind of like a vengeance paladin, where the paladin is the weapon version and the cleric is a caster version. And so I not only did I do that, but I put page numbers like, oh well, and this is where it says this in the. So this local coordinator goes, no, you're wrong. They can't do this, and that's all they said. I said, why not? Well, because the Adventurers League Player's Guide supersedes the Player's Guide by Wizards of the Coast. So whatever it says in the Player's Guide, the AL Player's Guide overrides it. The AL Player's Guide says you can't do that. I'm like, I've read the entire thing. It's like a dozen pages. It doesn't say that anywhere. Where does it say that? It says it in there. Stop arguing with me. So I went and I looked, and I did find a place where it said you can choose one of these deities and the domains, but it used the word can. In D&D, the words you use are very, very important. When you're reading a spell effect or an ability, if it says you can, that means you get a choice. You can either do this or not do this. If it says you must, or it just says you do, then there is no choice. You just have to do it. And so I actually quoted the page number, gave a direct quote in this reply, and I said, no, it says you can, not you must, or you just do. And in D&D, can means choice, must means you have to. So you're just reading this wrong. And she kept arguing with me. No, you don't know what you're talking about. I've already said. And then she went hashtag AL_LC, which is our little hashtag we could do to say that we were speaking on behalf of the Adventurers League as a local coordinator. And so I retorted back, no, if we read everything that you do, the way that you're reading it, none of DD makes sense, because all the places where it says you can do things, you must. And I gave a couple more examples where in the AL Player's Guide it said it said can, and it was used as a choice. I'm like, this is how it works, and I ended it with hashtag AL_LC. And fine, if you want to pull rank, I will pull rank. And we kept arguing until finally Fred, who at this point didn't like me, just came in and said, no, the other person is right, and went hashtag AL_RC, which meant no one was allowed to argue with him unless they were an admin, which the admins never got involved in this. They let the RCs do whatever they wanted. One of the other big reasons they became as tyrannical as they did. Now, I mention this because the deity that you choose has no effect on gameplay, aside from there were certain cities that had certain temples in them. And if you served a deity from that temple, sometimes you could get slightly cheaper spells. That was it. And due to the fact that there were so many other ways to get those spells, it didn't matter. So we had this massive argument that Fred had to come in and say, no, I am the law, about something that didn't matter. Like, it was just lore. It was flavor text. It didn't change anything. But he liked to feel in power. He liked to make decisions. And this happened constantly with all of the or not all, the majority of the RCs would just make these rulings about nothing. They were just pointless things like, no, this is how we're going to do it. Don't argue with me. Hashtag ALRC. And it was just so stupid. So that was the kind of people I had to deal with. Now, like I said before, not all the regional coordinators were bastards. There were a couple that I really liked, but they were in the minority, and none of them lived anywhere near me, so I didn't get to interact with them often at all. Fred, I interacted with him a ton, because we actually had our own separate Facebook page just for the regions that he controlled. And so I had like 4 or 5 different Facebook pages. I had to constantly check, and I had to reply in, or I'd be fired. Yeah, so what got me in trouble? So one day I was reading the LC Facebook page, and one of I think it was Fred, made this super long post where they basically said, hey, we found out one of you local coordinators went above our head and talked to the admins about something we were doing, and we got in trouble for it. We're going to tell you right now, you never go above our heads. All right? We gave you these jobs. We will take them away. You should be thankful of the opportunity. Never do this again. For those of you that have never been in a leadership position, that's called pulling rank. It comes from the military, where your commanding officer would quite literally pull rank. Say, hey, I'm a colonel, you're a private. I don't really care what you say. You're going to do what I tell you. This works in the military because if you disobey your commanding officer, you can go to jail or die. Like, it's a really big thing. Depending on where you are, disobeying orders has a really big consequence. And that's why it works. I've seen managers try and pull rank, and it's the worst thing you can do to an employee. They go, listen, I'm the manager. You're going to do what I tell you. Because all you've done is you basically turn that employee into one of 2 people. One, they will do the absolute minimum they possibly can to avoid being fired, just to make your life miserable. Or 2, they will quit. Meaning you now have, you are now short-staffed and you have to hire a new person. It's a really stupid thing to do. The only reason it sometimes works in retail or just working in general is you can actually lord their paycheck over them. If you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to fire you and you won't have money. And that's why they'll try and make your life miserable, because you threaten their livelihood. In a volunteer organization with no perks and a ton of work, pulling rank is stupid. There's no point, because literally they can all just go, okay, and leave, which is what a lot of people did. Fred at one point was running like a 500 or 1,000% turnover rate, meaning that turnover rate is basically calculated at the end of the year, where you see how many positions you have. Let's say you have 2, and then you see how many people have filled those positions over the year. So, or people you've had to hire to fill those positions. So if you go through a year, you have 2 positions, and they've been held by the same people that you hired last year, you have a 0% turnover rate. That doesn't happen. Most places, depending on the industry, operate anywhere between like a 10 to 15% turnover rate for like office jobs and things like that, all the way up to like retail and the food industry. Retail, you want like a 20 to 25% turnover rate. you'll sometimes go up to like 35%. And hospitality and food service, you'll be operating at 30 to 50% turnover rate, because you're just your staffing is based on when you have customers, and they fluctuate seasonally. So you will fire people and hire people at different times of the year, and you're constantly changing. So he was operating at like a 500 to 1,000% turnover rate. He only had in my area, I think we only had two positions as open, because Milwaukee was a big place. We basically covered the greater Milwaukee area, which includes all the way out to like Waukesha, and like it's a big area. One of the largest metropolitan areas in the country. So we had two positions. He went through, I want to say, like 10 or 20 guys in the year he was there. Like it was insane for a volunteer position to go through, and the majority of them didn't quit. He fired them, which again, not that smart in a retail or in a volunteer position. You don't fire volunteers. It's just dumb. So anyway, they make this post. They're pulling rank and telling people they're not allowed to talk to the admins. And he and I had to have a private conversation through a Facebook message about one of the conventions, actually. It was just logistical stuff, but I said, oh, I contacted him and said, hey, this convention's doing this, and this. We were wondering if you wanted to show up as a regional coordinator, and regional coordinators would get offers like that, where they would get like comped passes and stuff like that because they were a regional coordinator. So I was reaching out on behalf of one of the conventions, just going, hey, are you gonna show up? And we were talking a little bit, and he said, hey, what did you think about that post? Really proud of it. I said, to be honest, I really didn't like it. It's a really, really bad thing to do. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, you never pull rank. That's such a bad thing to do. I completely understand why you probably thought you should do it, but I train managers for a living. This is what I do, and the managers that I train that listen to me get their own stores. Like this is literally what I do. I'm very, very good at it, and I can tell you, I've seen a lot of beginning managers make that same mistake, and it's cost them employees, and some of them it's cost them their job. So please don't ever do that again. He goes, no, you don't understand. These people need to be put in their place because they don't understand that I am the authority here. I said, no, you're not. Again, this is not a dig on you, and I'm being as polite as I can, because again, I've dealt with people like this before. I said, this isn't a jab against you. What you're doing is extremely common with new managers and just new leaders in general. In fact, you can watch literally any like kids or teen show where there's like a leadership dynamic, and they will have an episode where the leader does exactly what you're talking about. And even some of the adult shows too, where the leader does exactly what you're talking what you did. And by the end of the show, they find out that was a bad thing to do, and they learn to work with their team instead of trying to command them. So no, what you did was really, really dumb. Again, not a jab against you. It's very, very common, but please never do that again. And he got mad. Like, he got furious with me. He's like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm an authority in what I do. He wasn't. And you can't tell me what to do. I said, I'm not telling you what to do. You asked for my opinion, and I gave it, as an expert in the field, again, I train managers. That's what they pay me to do. In addition to running sales for multi-million dollar stores and training sales staff and all these other things, like that's what I do. It's why I have a job. If you want, I'm more than willing to work with you and any other regional coordinators and just give you a few leadership tips to help make your jobs a little bit easier. Because I know it's a tough gig, especially in a volunteer environment. Like, you guys have it rough. I'm not saying you don't. But just a few tips and things like that will make your jobs a lot easier. And he grumbles and grumbles, and eventually we end the conversation. Find out, after we had this conversation, I go back to that post where he's talking about how they are the law. And I look through, and like 3 other regional coordinators went into the comments and said, yeah, we're the law. Don't mess with us. Blah, blah. And like they were all getting off on this thing of like, we're important. So this kept going on for the entire time I was there. And every month he'd give us this questionnaire. And at the end of every questionnaire, I could have left it blank. I should have left it blank. But I didn't. He asked, how am I doing? And I would give these like essay answers going, you did this that was bad, you did this that was bad, you did this that was bad, this that was bad. And I would just go at it. Not like angry or anything. I was very academic about it. You did this. These are what you should have done. And I would go to town on this, saying this is bad. You're going to cause issues for the Adventures League itself and for Wizards of the Coast if you keep doing this. And I'm going to end this right after this next thing. Because what eventually happened was around that time, a few Magic judges actually sued Wizards of the Coast because Wizards of the Coast technically classified them as, I think it was independent contractors, because judges technically get paid. They don't get a paycheck, but they got paid through goods. They would get, cards and stuff like that. But they're a massive part of Wizards, and Wizards would tell them where to work, what rules to follow, what the dress code and everything. And the thing about labor laws is independent contractors, the big difference between them and employees is independent contractors are like a plumber. You hire a plumber, they come in on their schedule, they use their tools, they wear what they want, they're very independent, and you just pay them to do a job. Employees work for you and do what they are told when they are told. They get a schedule, they get told what to do, they get told what to wear. And the reason there's a distinction there is the businesses don't pay payroll taxes on independent contractors. They do pay payroll taxes on employees, and there's a bunch of other protections for employees that don't exist for independent contractors. So what these judges did is they sued Wizards of the Coast for unfair labor practices and won. And what ended up happening, they either won or Wizards settled out of court because they were going to lose. And the whole lawsuit came down to how much control Wizards of the Coast had over these judges. And they were able to show Wizards is treating them as employees, but classifying them as independent contractors. It's a very common thing to do. It's very illegal, and it closes businesses. There was a business I worked for, which, if you guys want to hear stories of me selling kitchen gadgets on 100% commission, let me know in the comments. But that company misclassified their workers and filed for bankruptcy when the Department of Labor caught up with them. So this could have killed Wizards of the Coast. So what ended up happening is I told Fred, hey, listen, if you keep trying to squeeze these people and say you are the law, you're creating an employer-employee relationship. And the more you do this, the easier it is to prove. And if someone takes this group to court, all they have to do is show that you treated them as an employee and not as a volunteer by doing things like bringing up this stupid contract. And then they can actually sue the Adventurers League for back pay at minimum wage plus overtime hours. They just have to prove how much work they put in. And you're not allowed to say things like conventions don't count when you're talking about labor laws. You don't get to pick and choose what counts as work and what doesn't. Anything they do on behalf of your company counts as work. So we're talking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And you know what will happen? The people up top, the admins, will say, we never told them to do that. They will kick you guys out. And then the entire lawsuit for hundreds of millions of dollars will go after you. I've seen it happen. You declare bankruptcy and get rid of as much as you can. They put liens on your wages. Like, it's bad. So you need to stop doing this. And eventually, that's exactly what happened. Was Wizards of the Coast, after this lawsuit, fired all the local coordinators and regional coordinators for something completely unrelated, and then hired the admins to work for Wizards of the Coast as employees instead of pretending they were completely separate. And it was entirely because Wizards lost that lawsuit against the judges, and they were going to be in deep shit. I think statute of limitations for it is only like 2 or 3 years, so it's far too long for me to make a stink about it. And I wouldn't do that to Wizards because I like them. I just didn't like Fred. So yeah, that was just one of the many instances of moronic behavior that Fred did, and eventually he fired me. He said, "I'm sick and tired of always being insulted by you." I said, "I'm not insulting you. I'm telling you that you're doing your job bad because you asked me." He's like, "Fine. Well, then I don't want to listen to it anymore." And literally within seconds, he had kicked me out of the local coordinators group. His special group had blocked me. Like, he done all these things instantly, right as he sent that message. And I got fired from a volunteer position. Anyway, this is a long video. But if you guys want to hear more stories, I have them. And not all of them are horrible. There were some great stuff that happened when I was a local coordinator. But the things that stick out most to me were just the really bad interactions I had with Fred, who I believe is still a moron. But we have mutual friends who think much higher of him than I do. So it's possible I just had a bad experience with him for 6 fucking months. Yeah, that's all for me today. Like I said, if you want to hear stories more, stories about being a local coordinator, let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear stories about my first job in sales, where I would go to like Sears and Boston Store and do presentations for like kitchen gadgets and stuff like that, for a really dishonest company. Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, that's all for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.